Michael.
Hello, Leila. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. My guest today is Michael Kim, who is the Dean and a professor at the Don Wright Faculty of Music at the University of Western Ontario. And Michael, we have cooked something up and we're going to announce this today. But before we get to that, Michael, I've never thought about this before. But why is it called the Don Wright Faculty of Music? Who was Don Wright?
So Don Wright was one of our distinguished alumni, and he was kind of a jingles king. And so he made a lot of money off commercial music. And he built up quite a fortune. And then at one point, he decided that he was grateful for the music education he received at the Faculty of Music here. And he donated several $1,000,000 a number of years ago to endow the Faculty of Music. And so that's why we're now named the Don Wright Faculty of Music. And historically, I mean, we are a traditional music school. We do Western classical music and all these sorts of different things. But we also have a popular music and production program. And so we have different options for different types of students. And I think Don liked sort of our diverse and sort of flexible approach to different facets of music education.
Oh, that's really wonderful. And furthermore, I gather you also used to have, was it attached to the School of Music, a program where you trained piano technicians?
That is correct. It was discontinued a few years back, but we are looking and we're making efforts to revive this program. So it's one of those weird situations post-pandemic now where I think, finding really good concert piano technicians is getting harder and harder. And it's very much based on, sort of a basic training module plus an apprenticeship. So we are working right now with some of our industry partners, and we're hoping to establish sort of that basic training certification. And then for the students who come out of the program, they would then go into some sort of an apprenticeship. And we need to work on building and maintaining the pipeline of concert piano technicians, which is really vital for both our organizations.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, I can't even begin to, I keep threatening our piano technician. I say to him, "You're not retiring yet, are you?" Because I said, the day you retire, I'm going to retire because there isn't anybody else around at the level. I mean, to find really wonderful piano technicians, they're far and few between on this continent. It's really an important thing for young people to think about doing if they want to be involved in music.
And it's a really tangible route. I mean, we have a number of pianists who I think would actually make very fine piano technicians. And I mean, if we were to bring the piano tech program back, obviously, university, there's various steps and various processes, and some of them can be rather bureaucratic, but it is what it is. It would be really good to have our piano majors also to have some basic competency and skills in that, right? I think they need to be aware of how a piano mechanism works and understand, sort of the complex processes involved and the different ways that pianos can be voiced and tuned. And that sensitivity will also make them better musicians.
So let's talk about our exciting project together, which has come about because of the generosity, the passion, I would say, of an alumnus of your school who has been a remarkable lawyer and a judge, and is now retired and based in Vancouver. And that is Elaine Adair. And Elaine, in consultation with the two of us, came up with this idea. So do you want to explain when it's going to take off and what it entails?
Yeah, so, I mean, we're absolutely thrilled here at the Don Wright Faculty of Music. So one of my goals when I first became dean here is to develop, if you will, relevant partnerships, not only within Ontario, but outside of Ontario, and industry relevant partnerships, for lack of a better term. And of course, the Vancouver Recital Society is one of the continent's great recital series, and it brings in some of the top artists in the world right now. And Elaine, who was one of our distinguished graduates, she was a very talented musician, but as you said, now, she went on to a distinguished career as a lawyer and in the BC Supreme Court, is particularly passionate about piano, about vocalists. And so she has generously agreed to underwrite sort of a pilot program between organizations for 2 years where we bring in select artists to perform here at the Don Wright Faculty of Music, to meet our students, to give master classes. And for me, I think one of the important aspects we can offer our students is direct connections to artists who are actually doing it. They're in the field right now, and the artists we're going to bring in will connect directly with our students. Students will see what it is to be a performing musician, to be on the road, the competencies and the skills that takes. And so we're just beyond thrilled. I don't know of actually, frankly, any other partnership like this between the organizations such as your Recital Society and our Faculty of Music. And so I really am looking forward to the energy and sort of the synergy this will build between our respective organizations. It's just very, very exciting.
It really is exciting. And the first young artist we will be sharing is Emma Nikolovska. She is a most extraordinary young musician who is now based in Europe, but raised in Ontario, I believe, and studied at the University of Toronto. She studied violin, didn't she?
She studied violin, but then that eventually evolved into an amazing vocal career, and her energy, and she has this dynamic personality, and she has a way to communicate and grab audiences' attention. And there's a range of color and musicality that really makes her quite extraordinary. And so, I mean, she already is having a wonderful career, and I think it's just going to keep building. And so I think it'll be wonderful for our vocalists to listen and witness her playing, to work with her, to meet her. And I mean, for myself, when I was a younger artist, I do remember these can be really transformative moments when you see a young artist or you see an established artist and you hear them perform, you meet them, you perhaps have a masterclass with them. That one experience can propel you to a much higher level of achievement. And so it's going to be a real privilege to host her this April.
And, I find with Emma, I think Emma is a perfect example of how talent is just a part of the package, because Emma has such an incredible power of communication. She's absolutely riveting when she's on stage. And it's a summation of all the talents that she has. I mean, she's got a beautiful voice, and she knows how to communicate and wrap you up in what she's doing. You begin to feel like she's just singing at you directly, and you're just sitting with her and listening to her telling you a story. And I mean, that's what a vocal recital is, isn't it? It's just a series of storytellings.
Absolutely.
There's some terminology in music that drives me insane, which I wish we could get rid of, but nobody's come up with an alternative. So the first thing is vocal recital.
It's a fairly academic title, yes, pedantic.
I mean, we could call it an afternoon of storytelling with music or something. And the other thing is that this notion of classical music, it's a catch-all, and it's not what classical music is. Classical music comes from a very particular time, doesn't it?
It does. And I think one of the things that we're kind of fighting is the stereotype that classical music is very proper and very serious and stiff. And I actually think that actually repels audiences on occasion. But I think if we make classical music more accessible, one of the things that's easy to forget about as performers is that, as Vladimir Horowitz used to say, a concert is not a lecture. A concert is where people go to be entertained and to enjoy and love music, right? And I mean, I think that's very fundamental to what we do. And so one of the big successes, of course, of the Vancouver Recital Society is that you've had this eye to bringing in performers who have that ability to capture an audience and to communicate to an audience. And I think, so much of effective music education is not only the basic training that a good faculty of music can provide, but it's also providing models to our young musicians, bringing in people that they can listen to where they observe not only how they sing or how they play, but also how they communicate, how they interact with people, all these sorts of things. It's part of the total package. And I think that is the real education. And I think, if we're going to sustain our profession, we're going to sustain classical music. I think that's a really important distinction to remember. And being an academic myself and having been an academic for many years, I have to always remind myself, as I'm a piano performer as well, that you have to remember that a concert is where people come to enjoy and to be entertained, right? And so I think this sort of a partnership will provide that outlet for our students with some really wonderful, excellent artists, and it will take them to the next step as musicians.
Michael, now I'm actually just fascinated by all what you've just been talking about, because I believe, and I completely agree with what you're saying, except I think that novice hearers of classical music, people who are just coming to classical music, I don't think it's the music that they're nervous about going to a concert for. I believe it's the audiences who are older and who are sort of more stuck in their ways and have a certain way of behaving and expecting people to behave when they're in a concert hall. And so I think that can be quite intimidating to a young person who's coming for the first time. So let's say somebody's coming to a concert for the first time and they don't know any better and they applaud after the first movement of something. If they get a seething look from 6 older people, the chances are they will never come back again. So I believe that although we should try to, and I don't know how, put it up on a screen, tell novices, in general with classical music, we don't applaud between movements. This is how you are expected to make the environment enjoyable for everybody and, turn off your cell phone and blah, 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 blah. If we can educate them and the older audiences not to be like dragons, if somebody missteps somewhere, then I think we have a chance. But I really don't think, I look at experiments where there's something called the Yellow Lounge, I think, which is run by Deutsche Grammophon, where the atmosphere is casual and blah, blah, blah. And oh, yes, young people can go to those concerts and they can listen to great artists and they can use their cell phones and et cetera, et cetera. But that ain't going to get them to behave when they go into a real concert hall. So there's still a big chasm, and I don't quite know how you deal with that.
It's interesting you're talking about this. So I had the recent experience. So I, as dean, like to use my social media accounts just to get the word out there about our program and what we're doing. And so I recently went to one of our live concerts, and I took out my phone to just capture a photo of our live performers, and then somebody behind me says, "No cameras in concerts," and it was quite an amusing moment. I had a faculty member nearby, and he was in stitches because, well, I'm the dean of the faculty, right? And so I had to put away the phone, and I'm thinking, I bet you this happens much more than you think, and it is very discouraging. And if you read the accounts of audiences, for instance, during Beethoven's time or Mozart's time, actually clap between movements, and they actually just come and go as they pleased. And you look at those marathon concerts, some of which consisted of a couple of symphonies, a couple of trios, a piano concerto. I mean, they didn't sit all the way through that. They just kind of came in and they came out and did all sorts of things, which would be considered very distasteful today, right? So I think for whatever reason, we have trended towards a more formal approach to classical music. But if you look at some of the historic American orchestras, the Boston Pops comes to mind. So, when I performed there, and it was, I have to say, I was expecting, a concert hall, in seats, and no, people were sitting at tables, they were being served wine, they were eating while they were dining. And I actually think that's one of the reasons why the Boston Pops was so successful, because people really felt like it was a total experience. And so I don't know what the solution actually is, but I can tell you that, here in London, live music is alive and well, and we're getting good audiences. But I think we're encouraging, informality would be the wrong word, but we're encouraging an open mind to the concert experience so that people, and I feel like people are coming, a lot of people are coming to our concerts because they know they can experience it without judgment, without any sort of bias or preconceived notions. They know they don't have to dress up in a fancy suit. They don't, and that they're not held to very strict sort of patterns of behavior. So I think we need to be more open-minded about it. And to a certain degree, I feel like music is trending back to where it came from, because that's really how concerts were. Concerts were more like variety shows in the old days. And when you think about the antics of Franz Liszt on stage, right, and Listomania, and he used to throw handkerchiefs into the audience, and he even once fainted at the piano. Not that would be something that I would necessarily encourage in my students, but I think we have to remember that concerts in those days were far different from the concerts of today. And I actually think some of the composers would be kind of shocked at the formality of some of our concerts today. So it's just keeping an open mind and realizing that we also live in the age of social media. I actually am not offended, for instance, if audience members bring in their smartphones and they take a quick photo of the performers and they tweet it out or they put it on Instagram. Not all my colleagues feel the same way, but I said that's free advertising. They're getting the word out there. And I think in this day and age, especially as we recover from the pandemic, making people feel welcome, utilizing the tools of our time are key to sort of rebuilding our audiences and getting the beauty of classical music out there.
So let's go back to the reason that we're talking. So our first artist that we're going to be sharing is Emma. And then we're going to do one a year, are we?
Yes, I think the plan right now is to do one a year, and we will have a debrief after 2 years to see how that's going. And my sincere hope is that on both ends is that there'll be continued interest in perhaps expanding it and going farther, because I really think these sorts of partnerships are really, really important. And, universities right now, we're living in populist times, right? So people are questioning more, okay, if we're going to be funding universities, what are we getting for that investment, right? And so I think I experienced some of this while I was down in the United States, and we're starting to experience this down in Ontario, where if, for lack of a better term, and I know people find it offensive in academics sometimes, but what's the vocational relevance of what we're doing, right? And I think, so one of the pillars of our strategic planning right now, the Don Wright Faculty Music, is student career readiness, right? So what are we doing explicitly? We're trying to impart these skills to our students, but what are we also doing so that they have a better chance of success when they transition out of school to where they go next? Well, by giving them these experiences, by partnering with organizations like you, we are giving them a really tangible link to what's going on in the performing arts scene, connecting them to the best artists and to the most relevant young artists, and allowing them to experience not only their artistry, but their personality, their perspective on life. And, you'd be surprised how much you learn from question and answer sessions, right? So I'm anticipating with these artists, we'll have question and answer sessions. And a lot of these artists are very candid about their successes, their failures, what they went through. And then it really gives perspective, right, to these young musicians. When you're a young undergraduate student as a music major, you don't have that perspective. And it can be really life-changing and transformative when you have an artist like Emma, for instance, come and tell them, yeah, you know what? Not all auditions work out. Not everything is perfect. This is how I dealt with it. And I grew and I learned from it. And I mean, that can be one of those aha moments, which can inspire then a young artist to sort of propel themselves forward. Because as you well know, Leila, performing arts is not easy. It's very competitive. It's very hard at a personal level. There's a lot of struggle. There's a lot of hard work. And to be connected to these sorts of artists and to understand that they've had similar experiences and they've been successful, and to sort of get some suggestions and ideas about how they move forward. I mean, that to me is also a very important part of the educational experience.
As you're talking, I'm thinking the younger artists who we bring and who are in the sort of launching parts of their careers and who are not totally unknown and who already have concerts and have managements behind them. I think they're the ones who really can be the most valuable, because they're the ones who have just gone through this yesterday, and they're closer aligned to the thinking of the young people who are at university now. And they're more on the same wavelength than if, say, you bring a 76-year-old pianist to talk about the beginnings of his or her career in Europe somewhere. And I do remember being once at a roundtable discussion at one of the International Arts Management's conferences. And there were students who'd come from the Royal Academy who were saying that, they graduate and then there's an absolute chasm between graduation and how they're supposed to get themselves going. And it's so important to, by all means and what any means you can, to prepare them for the life that they're hopefully going to have in this amazing profession of the live arts and music.
I couldn't agree more. It's very interesting. So here at Western, we just appointed an AI officer, the first of its kind in North America. And he's actually a musician, as a matter of fact. He was an oboe student at Berklee in Boston. And we had an extended discussion with our administrative team at the Don Wright Faculty of Music. And I think there's a general agreement, as artificial intelligence and automation and all these sorts of things accelerate, some of the things that STEM disciplines offer are actually going to become increasingly automated. But it's much harder automate the concert experience, what we do in music, what we do in the arts and humanities. And I actually, maybe it's wishful thinking on my part, or maybe I'm overly optimistic, I actually believe that arts and humanities, liberal arts, performing arts, we're going to experience a renaissance in the next 10 to 20 years, because I think people are, as I said earlier, they're going to crave the beauty and the purity of the human experience. They're going to want that. And so spinning off on what we were talking off earlier, I actually really believe we have a moral duty in music schools and organizations to actually give more explicit training to our students in these sorts of things, and to provide that transition, because the chasm is really, really tough. So I've experienced this, with some of the undergraduate students we bring in. They come into our graduate programs, either the master's or doctoral level. And one particularly talented student, we have some really wonderfully talented students here, told me, well, I was just told if I practice hard and if I play well, things will kind of work themselves out. And I said, well, for some lucky people, that does happen. But no, I think in this day and age, you have to have a diverse range of skills and competencies. And so bringing in people like Emma, and, they're very close in age to these artists, they'll realize, oh, this is really cool. It's not like the old days where, there were certain pipelines and certain ways of doing things. It's very, very different now. And actually, I would argue that the music scene right now is more democratic as well. When I went to Juilliard, you had to be in certain pipelines. You have to go to that teacher. You have to go to that school because they can get the audition with that manager. You have to get that degree if you want the university job. So that's just the way it was. But now, like it or not, if you go viral on YouTube, or you come up with an innovative, unique idea, or just nobody heard about Psy before Gangnam Style, not that's the type of music we don't present, but the truth of the matter is that if you're creative and you have a really great idea, you actually can go straight to your audience. And if they like it, that's where things are at, right? So it's, I think, a big adjustment for the music profession right now, because people still like to have those filters and they like to have that, but that's no longer the case. So it's really about our musicians, young musicians who are going to operate, frankly, as sole proprietors. Sorry to use a business term, but they're going to be sole proprietors. And they have to, I always tell our graduate students, what is it that makes you different? What is it that makes you stand out? If we have a position, we get hundreds of excellent applications for a position, right? But when I'm scanning the applications, it's just like, what makes you stand out from the crowd? What's different about you, right? This is what we have to think. And I think, when you look at the successful artists you bring in the Vancouver Recital Society, they have that quality, right? They have something that makes them stand out from the crowd. And it's different things in different ways. But I think exposing our students to this and making them realize that it's important to have that basic musical training and to be fundamentally very competent at what you do. But you also have to develop your own artistic perspective and your own unique personality that people buy into. And it used to be that way in the 1920s in New York, right? When you look at the piano scene, I wish if I could transport back to an era in time, would be New York in the 1920s, where you had all these diverse personalities, Cortot, Rachmaninoff, Levine. And I feel like, this is my personal view and people don't have to agree with me, but I feel like there's a homogenization that's taken place over time. And there's a lot of excellent playing, but I don't get that distinct individuality, right? And I really think what we want to cultivate is sort of this balance between making sure you have the fundamental skills to be an excellent musician, but also have something that makes you different.
It's so interesting that you say that. And it's funny when you talked about the 20s and 30s. I mean, the crazy pianist came to mind. I don't know why. Simon Barrere. I mean, the stories about these people are legendary. And they really were characters beyond belief, weren't they?
They were really something. Yeah. That eccentricity, right? And that sort of individuality is what audiences flock to. I mean, I would have gladly paid $100 to hear Simon Barrere, and then you go hear Vladimir Horowitz in his early days, and then you hear Arthur Rubinstein. I mean, just the sheer variety. And there's something about, and I'm not saying this is necessarily bad, but there's this homogenization that's taken place, of which I was part of in my musical training, right? And I remember being frustrated, to be very, very frank. It was just like, I want to do things my own way, but if I got to play for the jury, I've got to play for the competition. If I go too far outside the box, 3 or 4 jurors are going to love it, and the other 3 or 4 are going to hate it, and I'll be eliminated. So it's better to just be more in the middle, right? And there's a lot of that taking place. I think we're starting to break out of that, but I think that's also contributed to some of the. It's not that audiences necessarily have dropped off, but when you had the personalities in those old days, I mean, those personalities kind of sold themselves, right? I mean, they were so unique and so different, and even if you found it completely offensive, I would find myself still wanting to buy a ticket because it would be a very unique concert experience.
Yeah, and risk taking is important. That's another thing students should know, that you have to make mistakes to learn from them, and you have to take risks, because if you don't risk failure, you don't risk success.
Absolutely. I mean, one rather simple analogy is one successful CEO was once asked, well, how did you become such a great CEO? Well, I make good decisions. And how did you learn to make good decisions? Well, by making bad decisions, right? I mean, it seems obvious, but that's what it comes back to, the way our education system is designed. We don't offer enough flexibility for people to really experiment and, frankly, to fail, right? I mean, sometimes you may have a piano student who gets up and you let them just do their own thing, and they completely flop in a performance. But I guarantee you, if you treat them with compassion and give them the space, they're going to learn from that, and they're going to be a much stronger musician for it, as opposed to somebody, well, do it this way so that nobody gets offended, and that way you'll get an A on the jury, or the jury will pass you to the next round. And I have to be, if I'm being really honest, Leila, I think when I look back at my earlier music education, I think in many ways I was very constrained, right? And I think that kind of, it was hard for me to break out of it. The best thing that happened to me was I got my doctorate degree, and I got my first job, and all of a sudden I didn't have to do competitions, juries. And that's when I really started growing and developing as an artist. That's when I started developing, growing. But it'd be really nice to see if we could start that process earlier.
I wish that you and I were not on I know there's Zoom and I know there's technology, but I wish we weren't at opposite ends of this enormous continent.
But I mean, we have this wonderful connection with this partnership, and I'm really hoping that it will develop more synergy. It will create more excitement. And like I said, I really don't know of any other partnership like this. And I really believe in having direct, and again, I hate to use a more corporate word, but industry relevant partnership, right? Where our students will have direct experience, interaction with practicing artists so that they can go to the next level. I think this is so important.
I have, as we go forward and we are selecting artists, and we have to keep going, I have got the perfect artist for us to talk about. I won't divulge it now, but I have the perfect one.
I am very excited. It'd be fabulous. It'd be wonderful. And I mean, I think, we've already taken certain steps. I mean, you probably know New Orford String Quartet is our ensemble in residence. We just appointed the Twerk Percussion Quartet, which is a very unique sort of thing as our ensemble in residence. And I want them to interact with all our students, not just percussionists, but with composers, with pianists, with string players, so that they develop a more creative and an open approach to music. And so I'm all ears, and I'm all open to this. I think this will be wonderful.
Great, Michael, and God bless Elaine for her energy, her enthusiasm, her great love of music. And one thing you forgot to mention that she does love and is very knowledgeable about, and that is Beethoven.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh,
well, it doesn't surprise. I think one of the great privileges I've had in being at Western is that we have a very dedicated and engaged group of alumni. I think they really value their experiences here. Actually, one of the strengths I feel that we have, and one of the reasons I came here as dean, is there is sort of a built-in compassion and flexibility. So I have found within my university academic experience, it goes a little bit like this. Well, we usually don't do that at Western, but let's find a way to make it happen. And that I really like. And I think that's why people like Elaine have been so successful. And to say that we're grateful to her would be an understatement. I mean, the gift she's giving us and giving our students will be enormous. And I'm just absolutely thrilled, and I'm really excited to see where this leads us.
Let's hope for a lot more Elena Dares in this world.
Indeed, but I actually think if we do this, it will actually inspire more people to do a similar sort of thing, because there is real relevance to this, and I think our students are going to be thrilled.
Bless you, Michael. Thank you. And I really look forward to our times together going ahead.
Thank you, Leila. We're very thrilled to partner with you, and very much looking forward to this. It's just very exciting times here.
Take care.
Take care.